Okay, so we all remember 2014, right? The Ebola headlines were everywhere, terrifying images, total global panic. But here's the thing, the real story of how it was stopped, it's not what you think. It's not about some new miracle drug. Nope, it's a human story. A battle for trust, for dignity, and it all kicks off with this really devastating paradox.
You know, what was so incredibly cruel about Ebola was how it weaponized our most basic human instincts. It literally turned to love against us. The virus spread through what researchers actually called acts of love. Think about it, caring for your sick parent or honoring your grandfather at his funeral. Those very moments became the most dangerous places to be. It's a brutal, twisted logic, and for a long, long time, we were losing this fight. Badly.
So to really get a grip on how things went so wrong, so fast, we've got to rewind a bit. Let's look at how this whole crisis just exploded onto the world stage. I mean, the speed was just staggering. The first few cases pop up in late 2013, and by March of 2014, everyone kind of thought, okay, we got this, it's contained. But they were wrong. Just 4 months later, it was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. By August, the World Health Organization declares a full-blown international emergency, and that's when the whole world really started to panic. And look, that panic, it was totally justified. At the absolute height of the crisis, the CDC in the US puts out this chilling projection. They said if we don't change what we're doing, and fast, we could be looking at 1 million new cases by the end of the year. 1 million. Just let that number sink in. Thankfully, that catastrophic projection never happened. But the final toll, it was still absolutely devastating. By the time it was all over in 2016, more than 28,000 people had been infected. And you have to remember, every single one of those numbers is a person, a family, a whole community just ripped apart.
So this is where we get to the central mystery of this whole thing. You've got billions of dollars pouring in. You've got the world's top medical experts flying in from all over. And yet, the virus just keeps spreading. What was going on? Why was this massive global response failing so badly?
What piece of the puzzle were they missing? Well, the answer wasn't going to be found in a high-tech lab or some new gadget. Nope. It was hiding in plain sight. It was right there, with the people, in the communities on the very front lines. The folks on the ground, the international responders, they had a name for what they were seeing. They called it community resistance. This was their official label for people who just weren't doing what they were told. You know, hiding sick family members, holding unsafe funerals, sometimes even attacking healthcare workers. And from their perspective, this resistance was the #1 thing stopping them from getting the virus under control. And this is where you can see this massive disconnect, right? It's like two totally different ways of seeing the same problem. On one hand, you have the international teams. They're seeing ignorance, people in denial, and what they called harmful traditions. They basically thought the local people were the problem. But then you had a completely different group of experts, anthropologists, and they saw something else entirely. They saw rational fear. They saw a deep, deep distrust of the government. They saw a history of abuse that gave people very logical reasons to push back. Okay, so this is where the whole story really pivots. Because to solve a human problem, well, you need experts in humans. The response needed a different kind of hero. They needed anthropologists. See, their job wasn't to stick the virus under a microscope. It was to understand the people. So while you had doctors and scientists in labs mapping the virus's DNA, you had these anthropologists out on the ground, mapping the social DNA, the codes of fear and trust and tradition that were actually driving this epidemic. And the message they brought back to the global health bosses was so simple, but at the same time totally profound. It was basically, hey, stop talking at people and start listening to them. Build real relationships. Work with the local leaders, not against them. And maybe the most important part was this. If your message isn't landing, don't blame the audience. The problem isn't them. The problem is your message. Okay, so what does that actually look like on the ground? Let's dive into one of the most explosive issues of the whole crisis: burials. How do you handle the dead? This was the big mental shift that had to happen. That resistance everyone was talking about, it wasn't ignorance, it wasn't irrational. It was a completely logical reaction from people who were watching their loved ones get carted off to die alone, and then seeing their most sacred rituals for the dead just trampled on by strangers. So let's look at the official policy.
In a lot of places, it was mandatory cremation. Now, if you're looking at this from a purely scientific, virus-killing perspective, yeah, it makes sense. It kills the virus, end of story. But from a human perspective, it was an absolute disaster.
I mean, for these communities with these deeply held beliefs about how you honor your ancestors, cremation was seen as grotesque, inhumane. So the very policy designed to stop the virus was actually making things worse. It completely shattered any trust and forced families to conduct burials in secret, which of course made them way, way more dangerous.
So, this is where that anthropological insight comes in. The response team finally pivoted. They created a new protocol, and this was the game changer: safe and dignified burials. And what did they do? Step one, they just listened. They actually sat down with community leaders and heard their concerns. Then they worked together to blend cultural needs with safety rules. They trained local people to be on the burial teams, so the dead were handled by familiar faces with respect. And slowly but surely, they started to rebuild that fragile trust that was so critical. So, what was the real-world impact of all this? Of this human-first approach? Well, get ready, because the numbers here are probably the most shocking part of this whole story.
Okay, so the total price tag for the international Ebola response was somewhere around $10 billion, a massive amount of money. Now, guess how much was spent on all this anthropological work? The stuff that was actually key to cracking the code? $3 million. That is 0.03% of the budget. It's practically a rounding error. And yet, this tiny, tiny investment had a massive, outsized impact. At the end of the day, it wasn't some miracle vaccine that turned the tide. It was the slow, hard work of listening, of adapting, of simply treating people like human beings. That's what made everything else, all the medical stuff, even possible. And the legacy of this is huge. In the world of global health, the word anthropology suddenly meant something new. It wasn't just a dusty academic subject anymore. It became shorthand for a smarter, more effective, and frankly, more humane way to handle a crisis. An approach that's built on partnership, not commands.
So the Ebola epidemic taught us a really powerful lesson, didn't it? You simply cannot fight a virus if you don't understand the people. And that leaves all of us with a really big question for today. We know there will be another pandemic, that's a certainty. The question is, have we really learned our lesson? Next time, will we be ready to listen?